Hey there, welcome back to True North Reviews. My name is Ryan, and today I'm wearing the nautical shirt for a bit of a thematic reason. Today we're reviewing the new album from Weyes Blood. This one is entitled Titanic Rising. Get it? Because these are sailboats, and I'm talking about the Titanic. I'm a friggin' genius, right? Anyways, talking about the music, Natalie Merring, she's also known as Weyes Blood. She is an American musician, singer-songwriter. I listened to the Father John Misty record last year. She was featured on that, on the title track. I thought she had a very haunting vocal performance on there. I thought it was so good that I had to check out this new record that she has right here. In terms of her sound, she goes for something very lush, cinematic, critic-friendly, sometimes pretentious. And I use the word pretentious in the nicest way possible. I feel like I'm taking a little shot or a little dig at music reviewers and just how they can be a little obsessive with things that can be analyzed to be very profound. But believe me, I'm just trying to make this album seem a little easier to approach, a little more accessible for fans of music that want to try something new and not get scared away by the analytical jargon. Now here's where I'm going to talk about the kind of atmosphere that this album really invites you to listen to it, and that's at nighttime, usually when you're having one of those sleepless kind of nights, or just when you have a lot of time on your hands where you can dig deeper into the lyrics. This album has 10 tracks, 2 are instrumentals, and the average song length is about 4.5 to 5 minutes. And the most important thing you can draw away from this album is that it's not really focused on melody, it's more focused on atmosphere and obtaining that through a very dream-like state. Not much of this album is going to be very catchy, in fact I would say, but the catchiest song on here would be Every Day. Kicking off this album, it reels you in with a very easy, uplifting kind of message with the song A Lot's Gonna Change. Basically, we get Natalie saying that if she could go back to her youth, back to a time where she was very innocent, she would tell herself that a lot of things are gonna change in her life, and you gotta roll with the times, roll with the punches, you gotta adapt with change. And this is the significant part of the album that she sets up in terms of the lyrics. She's wanting to tell herself all these things before she falls, and this fall might be falling in love, falling out of love, just letting her life kind of go down the toilet. This album definitely gets into that foreshadowing right away with the sad and bleak tone of the minor piano chords. However, the hopeful sense of this song comes from the angelic vocals. On the second track, this is where the orchestral pop kind of vibe gets settled in. Again, not a lot about the melody, more about obtaining that kind of atmosphere. It's about the journey and not the destination. On here we get a nice call and response with the guitars. And this second track here, it was one of the singles that came out back in January. I wasn't that big on it. It wasn't really hitting me emotionally as much as the other singles. And one of those singles that was hitting me emotionally and in other ways is called Every Day, and that is the subsequent track on the record. I've been hearing a lot of comparisons between Weyes Blood and Joni Mitchell, but I feel like Karen Carpenter is the singer I hear on this track Every Day. There's a bit of an old school vibe to this record overall. I feel like a lot of the influences from the 60s and 70s are definitely found on this record, but it's hard to imagine any of these songs on here being made in the 60s and 70s just because of the time and the technology. I know we had bands like the Beatles doing things that were well ahead of their time, but I just feel like this record has way too expansive of a sound instrumentally that it would be hard to see it being produced in that time. So I feel like that's one of the compliments I can give to this record. It definitely has this fresh sound, but it's also old school at the same time. Anyways, the track Every Day builds off these simple piano chords, very soothing and very easy to get into. I also love how the chorus is teased with a couple of refrains before we get that release of energy. Structurally, this track is a nice mix-up from the typical pop song that you would get, and it just builds with momentous energy, and it's a great track. On this cut, Every Day, you'll also find that important lyrical motif that I was referring to earlier with the falling down. There's this continuous sense of hope and hopelessness, and I think that's what the album cover is really trying to get at, as well as the album title is just hoping for something that we know that isn't going to happen, and that's the Titanic Rising. Moving on to the next song, Something to Believe In. I feel like this one is one of my least favorites on the record, which is quite a shame because it reminds me quite a bit of the Father John Misty's song Ballad of a Dying Man. Especially in the outro, we get like these very orchestral sounds and the vocals are kind of building with that. Instrumentally, the track has like these jangly, plucked guitars. We also get use of an electric guitar with these neat little slides. There's also a lot of melodic shape to the vocals that kind of just dangle in the air. Even though the song is a bit of a dud musically, I feel like it makes up for the lackluster qualities with the lyrics. I definitely find myself entangled with this sense of yearning or desperation for this woman who's trying to see this physical sign, just something to validate her love. She's just trying to figure out if this relationship's meant to be without being contradicted by the voices in her head. And no, that physical sign doesn't have to be sex. It doesn't have to be presence. It doesn't mean that you have to see like the light of God. It just means that you see things in front of you that make you smile and confirm your intuitions. The next cut on the record is the title track. This one is an instrumental. It's quite brief. It's about 1.5 minutes long. On here we get some ethereal tones, we get a lot of synthesizer work, and it really just drives home the ocean lake setting as it really complements the album cover. On to the next track, Movies. This one has a seamless transition, and I didn't really enjoy it when I heard it out of the context of the record as a single, and now it's quickly become one of my favorites on the record just in terms of the context, and just a lot of things can become better when you listen to an entire record. I feel like if you hear the track that comes before, the track after, you get a better idea of what the thematic kind of focus of a record can be. And knowing that this entire album has now released, I can listen to it and kind of get that idea that it is a slow burning kind of album. Like I said, the lyrics on this record could be kind of traced throughout. This song beautifully builds on top of the lyrics that were on Something to Believe In. We see Natalie expressing her love for the silver screens, something to physically see, something that she was wanting to believe in. Even though a lot of the time with movies we see these happily ever afters that don't usually happen with real love. Not that happily ever afters can't happen, it's just a lot messier than what movies usually depict it as. Regardless, this song definitely ties in very well with the album, really putting faith in something that's maybe futile after all. I just feel like after some time we kind of envision our pedestal being a lot higher than what is able to be attained. On the next song, Mirror Forever, this is another one of my favorites. I feel like Weyes Blood is lamenting the end of a relationship. On here we get a slick guitar-led interlude, and I feel like the vocals and lyrics are the draw of appeal for this song. The finger snaps in the verse sections are quite seductive. They're quite delightful. In fact, I think a lot of the instrumentation on this track will radiate, really just encapsulate you in this ocean lake wave of warm sensations. And then we move on to the cut Wild Time. I feel like this one is lyrically lacking some substance. I think it's quite vague, and the analogy I can make here is that it's like you're painting a picture, you're making too broad of strokes where you're just trying to have these images applied to too many kind of situations, and it kind of takes away that personal sentiment. Essentially, I just feel like it gets caught up with this cryptic kind of imagery that it's kind of nuanced in the way that you can interpret it. And yes, art can be beautiful for that reason, but I'm kind of just lost trying to figure out what these lyrics actually mean. It also doesn't help musically that it is 6 minutes long. I feel like it drags in some parts of the song for sure. It never just really finds its legging or the support in terms of something that is the longest song on the project. And then next thing you know, you're on the last 2 songs of this record, and it just flies by. The closing track is another instrumental. This one ends on a bit of a classical influence. This record basically ends on this very short and brief instrumental, just like the previous one. It focuses a lot on the string instrumentation as opposed to the synthesizers this time. So with all that being said, I'm feeling a 7 out of 10. I feel like this album is good, not great. I see the appeal. I see why critics are praising it. There are a lot of gorgeous vocals. There's a great sense of lush and cinematic production. The lyrics are very poetic. They spend a lot of their time reaching or grabbing for these larger than life messages, something that's a bit more profound, which can come off as a little pretentious, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that this is a very well-rounded and meticulously crafted record down to the individual notes. I just feel like, unfortunately, some parts of this record drags in terms of its pacing, with the longer tracks especially. eventually. It's not something that really hit me emotionally right away. Like, I'm about 5 listens in, and it hasn't really just hit me square on the face yet. I think it's going to take a while for it to grow on me, and I'm not 100% confident if I will return to it enough to make sure it's one of those great albums instead of just being good. Like I said before, I think you have to be in that mind state to be listening to this kind of Baroque pop, art pop kind of sound. And recently of late, I've been listening to a lot of punk, so it's been hard to adjust. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. I'm going to stop rambling now. I'm going to end this review. I'm going to just say that if you like Father John Misty, if you like Florence Welch, these kinds of artists, I feel like this will be a great addition to your library. There's the review of the new Weyes Blood record. Tell me what you thought of it. Sound off down below in the comments. Leave a like if you liked today's video. Subscribe if you're new in town. Tell me what I should review next. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a rockin' day.